The Consumer Price Index, which measures the rate of change in prices of goods and services, maintained its upward trajectory to 18.6% year-on-year in June compared to 17.75% in the corresponding period of 2021. According to the latest CPI report for June 2022, released by the National Bureau of Statistics, the recent report shows the highest rate of change in prices recorded since January 2017, month on month, as the headline inflation rate also strengthened to 1.82% in June and 1.78% in May. The rise in inflation poses a significant challenge to the CBN, in particular, which has hoped to contain the index within a 6% to 9% band. Well, joining me via Zoom to look at these figures amid burning economic issues is a world-class consultant to ECOWAS Commission, the World Bank, the European Union, and the AFDB. Is also a development economist, Professor Ken Ife. Good afternoon. Thank you for your time.
Oh, hi. Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me.
Prof, 18.6% is what we've seen from 17.75%. And there is, we see increases in all of the divisions, all through the figures we got from MBS this time around. And was this what you were expecting, despite all efforts aimed at reining inflation?
I was expecting an increase, a general increase in all parameters, but not of this magnitude. The magnitude is quite substantial. In some cases, almost 1% in 1 month. It's quite a high order of increase. And then I hope, but the experience is very considerably, because if you look deeply into the figure, you see the headline inflation move by about 0.78. Then you see the core inflation is the heaviest. The core inflation this time last year was 13%, but now it's 15.75%, 2.75%. That is a hell of a lot. And why is it significant? The core inflation is all indices minus food supply subindex. That means that the increase in all prices except food has jumped phenomenally. So immediately your attention will be drawn to transport network, fuel, energy like electricity, and all other things. They're all going up. And then when you try to collaborate it by looking at what happened to the food sub index, it increased, it actually decreased, because last year it was 21.33%, but now 21.83%, but now it's 20.60. So it's actually 1.2% less than last year. So unlike all other times, it has always been the food that is dragging the inflation up. So this time around is all other indices except food that is pushing. And then if you try to look, because the theater for all of this heavy increase, for core inflation increase, is always in the urban and rural areas. If you look at the urban is almost close now to food at 19.09%. It's so close to food. So there is a heavy increase in all these items that are being consumed in the urban area. And the rural area is not too far away, it's at 18.13%. So the urban is heavy. So that tells you the nature of the increases, where it goes. Urban is always higher than the rural, because you are using transportation to move food and move certain things between rural and urban area and all that stuff. And there's more consumption of ICT, of power and all of that in the urban
area. Now, Prof, this would lead me to asking again that all of the efforts from the monetary side, looking at non-conventional policies, all of this has been instituted, people-oriented policies focused on by the CBN. We seem not to be getting enough positives from them. And even just last MPC meeting, there was this aggressive 150 basis points shift in the MPR. Are we getting any positives from all of these moves, or do we still have to wait before we see the impact of these moves by the Apex Bank?
Well, there's always a time lag between when decision is taken to increase interest rates and when it does bite and show up in the figures. And I believe that it might still take a little more while. Maybe the next meeting might still increase the threshold. Who knows? Because the figure is getting completely out of hand. But it is not enough to think that monetary policy rate alone can rein in inflation. It's not going to happen like that, because it means that you are focusing on some people that have capacity to borrow money. And all those who have capacity to borrow money, they borrow it and use it for something else. Some of them, if they are borrowing and putting it into productive activity, then nobody would worry. It will bring more employment and increase more production. But that's not the case. Some of them are borrowing it and using it for political reasons, borrowing it and using it to import anything and everything from China. And then you can see over 2 trillion naira deficit, trade deficit with China alone. And they're just chasing the dollars and using them. And anything they buy from import, as you could see from core inflation figure, any imported item coming in there is going straight to the consumer and imported inflation. So that's the dilemma that we have. We have to be able to control demand of foreign goods, appetite for foreign imports, and at the same time, see what can be done by the structural factors. Because insecurity looms very large in those figures, increase in security, apparent restriction in supply chain and disruptions, and many things are playing in there. Not many people are even in the banking sector, over 40%. And then how many people are actually in the transmission belt of monetary policy? 100 million people, at most. 80 million don't even have a bank account. 80 million are below poverty line. So who is it that you can say, look, let's squeeze life out of them?
Prof, how worried are you with regards to the necessary support that should come from the fiscal side? And obviously, we are moving towards the 2023 elections, and it seems to be like our attention is shifting gradually to electioneering, the processes, and all of that. Do you think this would also have an impact one way or the other on all of these figures coming in from the NBS?
The figures will always have an impact because they send alarm bells, and then people who are likely to invest are going to be more worried about the value of their investment. Not many people would want to borrow money here at 10%, or bring money borrowed at 10%, and then only to have inflation eat up 18% of it by next year. So, people may be worried about that. But of course, fiscal authorities have quite something to do there, either by increasing the mopping up of local liquidity as, from way of domestic borrowing, but also restrained borrowing too, because restrained borrowing means you're going to pay less on debt service. And debt service is becoming a big challenge. But of course, collecting revenues from people that are due, rather than allow them to use them to bump up purchases and things. So there are, some taxes may come in, more VAT or more taxes from all kinds of manners of places to increase government revenue, to reduce the appetite for more borrowing. So these are some of the things, and NNPC is not helping us, because they are pushing more bill on petrol subsidy. Where are you going to borrow 4 trillion naira from? And if you borrow, what are you spending it on? So there's a lot more pressure on the economy, on the fiscal side of things.
Even the IMF has come out strongly to say that there's a global review, that of our economic forecast, and of course that will be across board. Nigeria will not be insulated, and we'll definitely get our own projections. And the considerations are in response to inflation and recessionary fears. That is also what they're citing. So what do you think, what figures are we expecting after this review or reprojection by the IMF and the likes of the World Bank with regards to economic growth in Nigeria?
I think we'll still be on track on economic growth, because don't forget, there are quite a few things on economic growth. You have consumption taking part, you have investment involved in that calculation. There is considerable growth in consumer consumption, household consumption. There's growth in money supply, but we may have to temper that. Investment is dicey this time round. Government consumption is also going up as well. So So I think the growth will still be okay. The projections on growth will still fly. But what I don't know is how soon the massive revenue generation initiative by Ministry of Finance will kick in to improve the revenue flow. What was going to be a substantial flow of revenue from private Petroleum Industry Act, which is likely to double the revenue from FIRS, is now going to be swept away by the increased demand for petroleum subsidy from NNPC and all the shenanigans going on with petrol subsidy. And then, of course, quite a few amount of that hydrocarbon tax is going to, 90% is going to Frontier Basin Exploration Fund. So, government keeps going back to via some of that money to use them to support the petroleum subsidy bills and stuff like that. It's very, very tough time ahead, to be honest. And government will still have to borrow because we need to borrow in dollars to be able to service dollar-denominated loans. We cannot afford to default. And also, don't forget that we still have ways and means of over 15 trillion overdraft to government that still needs to kick in at some point. Because I understand that was likely to be 30-year loan refinancing, and then with moratorium of 2 years. So that's still a headwind coming.
My fear about debt. You just talked about that now, Prof. And this is worrisome when you look at the debt and how we can get enough revenue to sort out all of these obligations that we have as a country. Well, you've talked on 4 trillion naira for subsidy, which is something we've been on now, every now and then. Two things is, how sustainable is this? Do you also agree that we should face it? We should get subsidy out in phase, maybe in phases, 20%, 10%, gradually until we let go of it. Because outright removal of fuel subsidy might not be too good, particularly with the present situation of Nigerians.
Outright removal is an inordinate risk to social upheaval and political violence. And I don't think that is the course of action, a sensible course of action. But staged approach will require that you do incremental increase. You go to 200 and then gradually move to 230, 240, and then gradually move to, so it's a gradual move. But at the same time, you have to rationalize capacities, see how much modular refineries are going to add to capacity, and then when Dangote is coming on stream, there will be a commensurate rise in the petroleum price as Dangote is coming in on stream, and then you do that gradually. But then some of those proceeds, additional, whatever saving you are making from a subsidy, you have to go and use it to do certain things to help the matter. For example, we are moving to gas transition. So why don't we have the government put some money, 5-10 billion for a start, and get the big lorries, the trucks, the conveyor, all those things that are conveying goods, go and change their consumption to gas instead of petrol and diesel. Let them retool, put gas in the chambers and cylinders so that they can start using gas. That will significantly reduce the consumption of diesel and PMS. When all these buses carrying people, all the passenger buses and all these things, they are all changed to gas, this thing, it will reduce consumption. And it will be easy for them to subsidize that because you go and distribute them through the NNPC super stations, then you can control. So those tankers bringing fuel can go and refuel with their gas in NNPC stations, the transport network can go and refuel at NNPC stations, and then gradually you start winning people away from PMS and diesel. And at the same time, the NNPC can invest in some modular refineries. Just look at if they put 50 billion out of the 200 billion government is giving them, 10 billion in 5 modular refineries that have 20,000 barrels per day. That's already 100,000 barrels, half of what, about almost half to 20 to 40% of what we are currently consuming is already going to be produced. And NNPC will just have a 20% investment in those to make sure that they can guarantee them crude and then offtake their produce. So in that way, you are building local capacity. And some of these people that are lying around in the four refineries that we are paying salary for not doing anything, a lot of them will find their way into these modular refineries, and any money borrowed there will be repaid over 2 years. So at the same time, Dangote will come on in stream gently. Don't expect that Dangote to turn in everything he's producing to Nigeria. It's not possible. This guy has to sell some of his crude abroad, some of his refined product abroad to earn dollar, to pay his dollar-denominated loans. This guy has spent over $19 billion. You think he's going to be Father Christmas? For how long? He's going to sell some of those in dollars to pay his bills. So we can't build our hopes on him sorting all the problem out. So we have to look at other ways.
Finally, Prof, let's look at the worst and best case scenario for Nigeria. Inflation is staring us in the eye, volatility, loan accessibility, and of course, heavy dependence on loans, which you've also said we must keep borrowing. Loan repayment strategies are also there, and the value of our currency, talking about the FX challenge that we have. What are your thoughts on the worst case scenario or the best case for Nigeria moving on in 2022?
Well, the worst case is that the inflation will hit 20% in no time, maybe in the next 3 to 4 months, but then it will start coming down because we're now going to have food harvests coming in. But they're going, food is not that much now because food sub-basket is 20. So that may bring it a little bit down, but other cost parameters can only come down when we deal with the frontal challenge of fuel subsidy, as well as, because you know what the impact that will make is horrendous. And the other thing I also suggested to NNPC is this: if you don't want to process your crude in Nigeria and you don't want to support those who are prepared to invest in it, then give this crude to the neighboring Francophone countries. Let them build their own modular refineries and sell the fuel to us. It's better for them to sell the fuel to us and reduce the amount of our own fuel we are paying subsidy to that we are carrying over to them. Is it not easier? Instead of transporting it to Belgium and China, they just come and bring their trucks to Nigeria and carry their crude and go and refine. And we buy some, and they save us the subsidy we are paying for the thing that they buy. How can we be selling fuel 185 and they are selling 500? Somebody is earning an arbitrage of 230 something, 225 naira per liter. Somebody's earning that money, 300, 325, and we're selling at 185. Somebody's earning that money from us, and we are paying tax and paying for inflation, paying for everything. So let them have the crude. Guarantee them the crude. You can even invest 10% equity in them if you don't want to invest in your own country. Invest in the neighbors. Let them refine for you, and let us be ashamed that our neighbors are the ones refining for us. But it's still better than importing it from afar and paying so much money for transportation of this crude.
It's a good way to leave it there. I've been speaking to a consultant of ECOWAS Commission. He's also of World Bank, European Union, and the FDB. He is a development economist. Professor Ken Ife, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We really appreciate this.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure.